Hey everyone, my name is Nicole Gray. My topic for my research is cultural relevancy in music education. Now, I think it's important for me to define what cultural relevancy means before we start diving into these articles. So, Doyle, the researcher that I've looked at numerous of her articles, has two different definitions with two different terms. So, culturally relevant means when teachers are actively learning about students' backgrounds and use this knowledge in their plannings to connect with the students. This can be through popular music, materials, as well as offering non-performance based courses. When a teacher is being culturally responsive, this is when teachers are sensitive and responsive to the cultures of their students. The main purpose is to connect with the students and making sure that their students' cultural as well as social identities are being valued. The main word that comes to mind here that kept coming up was this idea of connecting to your students. So connecting the material to the students' lives, as well as connecting teacher to student, human to human. So why do we study cultural relevancy, or why should we in music education? So think about these few things. The school demographics that your program is in. Is your program applicable to the students that make up your school? This can deal with retention as well as recruitment. If you want to build a program, you need to make sure that your music classes that you're offering fits the lifestyles or the interests of your students. That goes along with the application of daily lives. And then this last question down here is more of a to get you to think question. What makes a certain music genre worthy to teach in school, and what makes a genre not worthy to teach? So how do you ensure that your music program is culturally relevant? So this is a question that I would like you to either think or write down. Think of a few ways that you're incorporating multicultural music, materials, or practices into your music program. So take a second just to think about that. You can either write it down or just think about it. All right, so the first article that I'm reviewing for today is Predictors of Culturally Relevant Attitudes and Expectations of Urban Music Teachers in the USA. Participants. So there were 584 music teachers from 20 large cities in the US within this study. Now I have a picture of Barbie down here, and we'll talk specifically why I chose this picture later, but I wanted to just point out two kind of funny things here. The trumpet and the flute are kind of haphazardly shoved in I assume that's supposed to be an instrument stand or holder. It doesn't look very stable to me. And then Barbie is also wearing high heels here. I don't think I personally could teach for hours and hours in high heels, but you do you, Barbie. We'll talk about specifically why I chose that picture in just a little bit. So the method of this study. So again, almost 600 music teachers took this study or participated in this study. So this study was administered with a CRT questionnaire via the internet. CRT stands for Culturally Relevant Teaching Questionnaire, which consists of 57 items. They had a whole list of dependent as well as independent variables. So the dependent variables are culturally relevant attitudes about teaching as well as music, implicitly prejudiced attitudes, and expectations. And then the independent variables, the researchers wanted to see how these variables were manipulating or changing the dependent variables. This is student-teacher match or mismatch of race and ethnicity. Urbanicity, now Doyle, the researcher, defines urbanicity as a population where the majority is non-white, with low levels of income and varying social economic status. Teacher quality indicators, there were a whole list of these, but basically it was how many years a teacher has in their field of teaching, the level, so if that's a bachelor's, master's, PhD, as well as their title in the school. Teacher preparation, the college, or the program that they attended, as well as support. Support meaning administration support or community support. So here are the findings. Think back to that Barbie photo. Why I chose that was because the participants in this study were mostly Caucasian, female, from suburb or rural locations, middle class, and higher economic backgrounds. Meanwhile, the schools and the students that they were teaching, most of the Title I schools, so there were 68.3% of the schools were Title I. Majority of the student populations were Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, with 74.4%. So there's a difference between who is teaching, the demographic that is teaching, and the demographic that's being taught. Support. Support was the strongest predictor for expectations and implicitly prejudiced attitudes in teachers towards students. This next point was really interesting to me. This is participant scores. So the teacher scores were positive between staying culturally relevant in attitudes in teaching and music, but the same scores were held negatively for implicit prejudiced attitudes about music students in these urban environments. Doyle hypothesized that there's a phenomenon going on that's called socially acceptable answering. So when a researcher or somebody's asking you a direct question related to race, there's a understanding that we need to be diverse and accepting. So people, when they're asked a direct question about race, will answer in a respectful, kind of politically correct way. But then social acceptable answering shows that there have been studies done that Doyle cited that showed that when researchers ask less direct questions, indirect questions, or just making observations, that those biases and the implicit prejudice attitudes emerge. So there's a difference between what they're answering, what they're saying they feel, versus what they're actually portraying with their actions. And then finally, teachers with more years of experience, or you can think of this with teachers that have been away from their graduate studies for longer, may have not received formal teacher preparation or studies experiences about culturally relevant teaching. So you could think about this as that older teachers possibly are kind of stuck in their ways. They're using what has worked in the past, but that they're not coming up to speed with how to be culturally relevant in the classroom. All right, Article 2 was Cultural Relevance in Urban Music Education, a synthesis of the literature. This is also by Doyle. It's a separate article. So this article was actually a synthesis of a bunch of different music education literature from 2001 to 2012. So there's some interesting findings that came out of this. Socioeconomic factors had significant impacts on student participation at the secondary music level. Students who participated in large ensembles tended to be those that were high academically achieving, white, and native English speakers. There was a disproportionate representation of minorities within these music ensembles. The third point, there's a need in K-12 public schools for non-traditional music offerings. This is meaning band, orchestra, and choir. That's a great place to start, but we need to get up to date with the times. We need to make sure that what we're teaching actually applies to the students' lives and that they're interested in it. So not every student likes the traditional 3 music offerings. So Doyle suggested hand drumming classes, hip-hop classes, guitar classes, songwriting, just making music education in general broader, more diverse. So this is a way that we can attract more students into our programs and to teach and spread music to all. A specific study by Leggett in 2003 showed that almost 400 K-12 music teachers agreed that multicultural music should be incorporated into public school music classes. 99% of them agreed with that, but then only 21% of the teachers included multicultural music in their concert programs. So what they're saying and what they agree with is very different from what actually happens in reality. And so Leggett hypothesized that there's a connection between Eurocentric approaches to music curriculum, meaning that like you teach what you have been taught and you teach what you're comfortable with. So what you likely experienced as a student, you are likely to follow when you end up teaching yourself. So evaluating, what you're comfortable with and is that the best practice. So here's some takeaway points that I think are important from the articles. There are many factors that influence a student's decision to participate in music programs. We saw that socioeconomic status and all the factors that go along with that really can impact if and why a student wants to participate in music ensembles, as well as if students feel like the program is relevant to them. Again, cultural relevancy. Is it representative of their culture as well as what they're interested in? There are many factors that influence a music teacher's desire or ability to incorporate culturally relevant music materials into a music program. Through the articles, I saw that many of the teachers believe in multicultural teaching within a music program, but a variety of reasons, like it's difficult to come up with meaningful new curriculum, the materials aren't widely out there, meaning that access to appropriate songs and literature just hasn't caught up with the times yet, as well as pressures from administration, as well as the population or the community surrounding that school, what they think is important to be taught in a music classroom. And then, with the third one, I kind of just went over that. While educators want to incorporate the diverse literature, many do not for a variety of reasons that we just talked about. And then I wrote down here for the last point, does traditional equal the best? So meaning that with a Eurocentric approach to music curriculum, is that the best just because that's how you were taught or how it traditionally has been taught? Kind of pushing back against what has been normal or accepted. Why have we taught in that way? And how can we change that to make sure that all students, all demographics are being represented in the music classroom? I hope you enjoyed.